event host here at Annie Bloom's Books. Welcome. I love looking out and seeing a jam-packed audience. That makes my heart feel really good, especially when people come out for a talented and deserving author such as Shavaun Scott. On behalf of Annie Bloom's, I want to say thank you for being part of our story. Annie Bloom's has been here for 46 years, almost 47 in fact.
Oh, wow.
And a store in a neighborhood such as this that is independent and small and family-oriented and also independent, did I say independent, does not survive for 46 years in the economic conditions to which we have been accustomed without the support of our community. You are our community, so on behalf of the store, thank you.
Yes.
Tonight, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce Shavaun Scott in support of her new memoir, Nightbird. Shavaun will be joined in conversation with Heidi Yewman. They have written bios that I'm going to read. They're going to talk. There will be questions. The books are for sale up at the counter. Please feel free to buy multiple copies at any point this evening. And then Shavaun will be more than happy to sign books after. Also, on your way out, Shavaun has a cupcake for you. Aww. So please feel free to grab one as you are leaving. All right, Shavaun Scott has been in practice as a psychotherapist for 35 long years, but she's best known as the Facebook funny meme queen of Marshall Park. She's written 3 books prior to her memoir, Nightbird. The most recent was Wounded: The Forgotten Survivors of Gun Violence. When an issue comes up that disturbs her, she's likely to write a book about it. And Heidi Yewman is a gun control advocate, author, and documentary filmmaker. She's best known for her book Beyond the Bullet and her international award-winning film Behind the Bullet, which explores the impact of gun violence on individuals and communities. A graduate of Columbine High School, Heidi served on the board of the Brady United Against Gun Violence. As a survivor of childhood abuse, she is driven by a commitment to reducing trauma and gun violence while promoting public safety through education and advocacy. Her memoir, Dumb Girl, will be released this August. Please welcome, with all your heart and all your soul, Shavaun Scott and Heidi Yewman.
Thanks.
Yeah,
That was good.
I'm just blown away with all the faces here that I know and love, and I know you all from different places and different writing groups, but so many people that I consider my chosen family that we've been writing together for years, and it just really, really moves me. I was sure at 5 o'clock tonight with thunderstorm that nobody would bother coming out in the rain. And I was going, it's okay. You know, if you only have 3 or 4 people, your family will be there and you can talk to them. But it's just wonderful to have Heidi here. We met in August last year in kind of a weird way. Do you want to share how we met?
Yeah, so I was looking up comps for my upcoming book, like what other comparable titles that I could, as I was figuring out how to code it on Amazon and all that stuff. And so I came across your book called Mindset of Mass Killers. And so I do a lot of work around gun violence, and I was like, ooh, that sounds like a great book. And then I looked her up and found out she was in Portland. And so I went to her website and said, hey, you want to have coffee? And we like hit it off immediately.
We had so much in common, mostly that people die in our books, and and that other people go, oh, you write such dark books, and it's like, yeah, we both do. And so that was sort of like this immediate, you're into death and I'm into death, and we talk a lot about death and trauma, and so it was a good fit.
Yeah, we sort of a friend that doesn't think you're a weirdo for embracing the darkness. So
That's true.
That was nice.
Yeah, wanting to understand it. But I highly, highly recommend Heidi's movie, which you can see on Prime.
It looks like
Behind the Bullet, or is it Beyond the Bullet?
Behind the Bullet.
Behind the Bullet.
Yeah.
It's really, really well done, and it's from a really interesting point of view. And she's very active in the movie as an interviewer. So it's on Prime. I was blown away by it, and here she is. I feel so lucky to know her.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
So we're gonna have a conversation, and then about 15 minutes to the end. We're going to go for about 45 minutes, and then we'll open it up for about 15 minutes for Q&A, so have those in your mind. I'd like to just remind you, if you have your cell phones, to turn them off or silence them. That would be helpful. And then, of course, Shavaun at the end will be happy to sign books. So, yeah, so should we go ahead and get started?
Let's get started.
All right. I think you were going to, we'll start off with you reading from your book.
Okay. So a few of you have read the book, and a few of you have heard me read the beginning of the book. And so I'm sorry if I'm repeating it, but it's sort of the fulcrum of the story is how the book begins. And so I'm going to read that. And I will say it's a little bit of a sledgehammer. And so there's a little bit of a warning, take a deep breath. But I do try to integrate some of my classic dark humor at other places in the book. So I'm going to read a few other brief things after that later. Okay, so place is a really important part of the book because as I change geographic locations, it kind of mirrors the way that I'm changing over time where I live. So I'm going to read the prologue, which is very brief. My hometown smelled like exhaust and chorizo. The steel mill and freight trains belched black smoke into the sky. The dark gray air burned my eyes, leaving them permanently shot with crimson. If you tried to run, your chest hurt when you inhaled. Breathing was dangerous. People spoke Spanglish or hillbilly pidgin. Mariachis blew trumpets at weddings and quinceañeras. Everybody got drunk at funerals, and on weekends swill Bacardi from the bottle in the back of cruising lowriders. Girls who got raped after football games already knew how much money they'd get from welfare if they decided to keep the baby. It was best not to cooperate with the DA, since every criminal had at least one cousin who did hits. They'd get back at you if you snitched. I was a permanent alien in my hometown. All I ever wanted was to run away. But there were churches, hallelujah, baptized and born again. Churches with rock bands on Saturday night. Churches that were shimmering warm and bright, where the light was clean and holy, where God's family opened their arms to hug you, and they said they loved you, and everybody read the rules together from the same book. You could be baptized in the Spirit and speak in tongues, get filled with the Holy Ghost, and punctuate every sentence with "Praise the Lord," and trust that good things will come to those who wait. In church, I learned that there was no need to think about the future. Just follow the blood on the tracks and trust God, who controls all things, even the temperature of the water that comes out of the tap. God, who numbers every hair on my head. God will take care of my life. No planning required, no thought required. Just pray. Don't feel, don't think, just pray. Keep praying, keep praying. Pray harder. Pray until you're out of breath. 911, a night in October 2004. My hands were shaking so badly that I had a hard time holding on to the phone, but I realized I had to hit 3 numbers to call for help. Time had stopped. Everything was suddenly wrong. It was dark and the wind had picked up, sending the wind chimes on the back deck spiraling. I was having a hard time thinking. I paced in a circle with small, frantic steps as I hit 3 digits with my index finger. As I waited for the call to connect, I reminded myself to breathe. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3 rings. Then finally, a male voice greeted me. "Please send an ambulance." The words choked around the ragged sobs escaping from my throat. "I came home and found my husband. He's hanged himself." There was a long pause on the other end of the phone, but I filled the void with sounds I'd never made before. Finally, the man said, "Ma'am, this is 711. We're repair. We can't help you. Maybe you should try 911. "Oh, of course, I'm sorry," I said, ever polite. "I was trying to call 911. I'm upset. I'll try again." I hit the button to disconnect the call. "Breathe," I said aloud as the wind chimes tinkled. I stared at the shaking phone in my hand as the numbers swirled. My fingers were drunk. The shaking spread from my hands up to my arms and vibrated through the center of my body. I hit 3 more digits and waited much longer this time. I could hear myself gasping for the air, and the room was spinning. I was dizzy, weak in the knees, and cold as if I'd suddenly fallen into ice water. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3 rings, 4 rings. Finally, I heard a woman's voice. She sounded kind, and I was relieved. "Please send an ambulance. My husband is dead. I came home and found him hanging, and I don't know what to do." "Ma'am, you've reached directory assistance at 411. You need 911. "Oh, shit," I sobbed. "Ma'am, I'll put you through to 911. Just hold on." While the wind shook the house and rattled the windows, I kept pacing, shaking, and trying to breathe. Then out in the driveway, on my knees, with sharp gravel pricking the skin of my bare legs, I held the phone to my ear, and there was a new man on the line who kept saying, "Calm down, ma'am, calm down." The part of me hovering above recognized that he was being absurd. No one ever calms down because someone tells them to. I understand these things because I'm a therapist. Aftermath, The Dirty Bomb, October 2004. "Michael, she's completely regressed," Janet whispered. I could hear her speaking on the phone in the hallway next to my bedroom, where I lay curled into a fetal position under a thick down comforter. My friend Janet and her husband Michael, both psychologists by profession, were in their late 60s and retired. They lived 350 miles away in Palm Desert, but she'd driven all night to get to my home on the central coast of California when she'd heard about the suicide the week before. Warm-hearted and good-humored, Janet was like an older sister to me. She hadn't left my side since she'd arrived. "She won't eat, can't sleep, all she does is cry. She blames herself. God damn him, this is awful." There was a pause. "Oh, it was an elaborate production. You know how theatrical Robert was. He left a poster-sized sign on the front door directing him where to find him. The house was dark except for a spotlight shining on his body." Another pause. "Yes, I've called all over. Santa Barbara, Ventura, LA. I even tried the Menninger Institute in Kansas. No psych hospital will take her for PTSD unless she's suicidal. She's not. And even if she were, they'd only keep her for 3 days. Insurance won't cover it. It wouldn't be enough time to do her any good." It was terrifying to witness myself unraveling. I felt like an untethered astronaut floating backward into space, staring wide-eyed into the darkness, knowing that my oxygen was thin, and even though people were around me, no one knew how to get me more air. I keep drifting further and further backward into the void. Robert's smiling face kept appearing in my mind, along with the constant accusation, "I killed him." I sobbed and shook and retched. I spoke perseverative nonsense until my throat closed. The small hard ball that became my stomach refused to accept food. The stranger in the mirror frightened me, and I tried not to look at her. My eldest son and his wife came 170 miles to deal with the coroner and take care of the burial arrangements. My 21-year-old son took the train home from college and slept next to me in my bed while I fought my nightmares. He cut up pizza into small bites with a fork and tried to feed me 1 bite at a time. My daughter came and drove me to therapy, where I met with a befuddled woman who had no idea how to help. Friends brought food that I couldn't eat and didn't want. I told everyone it was my fault he was dead. It was impossible to get warm. Shivering constantly, I dressed in layers, despite the temperature in the 80s. I wore thermal underwear covered with a flannel shirt and a suede coat over that, baggy flannel pants, and thick socks inside of bulky Ugg boots. This was my standard outfit every day and night for weeks. I cocooned under an electric blanket, yet still I shivered. Even with double-dosed Ambien, sleep was never more than an hour at a time. I would wake from nightmares of trying to breathe life into Robert's dead body while I screamed at him, "Why?" Lighting white candles, I talked to ghosts at night. Convinced my house was haunted, I left messages for a psychic who never returned my calls. When barred owls called mournfully from the pine tree outside my bedroom window, I was convinced they carried messages from the dead that I couldn't understand. I didn't want to die, but I didn't know how to live. "Michael," Janet said, "she can't care for herself. I want to bring her home to us." And you know what? It worked. It worked. And I think if there's a number of key messages from the book, but it's we can survive terrible, terrible things, things that if we knew in advance it was going to happen, we wouldn't believe we could survive it. But with people around us and people who share their hearts and are present for us, just as trauma happens, healing happens too. So yeah.
So what struck me about those couple chapters was the 911 call. So I think of 911 as 3 numbers, pretty simple, and 2 of the numbers are the same number, right? When we had rotary phones a long time ago, right, I never understood why there was a 9. That takes so long. It should be 111. But anyway, why was it so hard for you to call 911? Why couldn't you get those 3 simple numbers done correctly?
I really experienced for the first time how much trauma breaks your brain. And my prefrontal cortex, that thinking part of the brain, went offline completely. And that emotional center of the brain, that amygdala, was freaked out. And I think I had an adrenaline rush, which was why I was shaking so bad. And I was so cold. It's like you have vasoconstriction when you're in shock. And I've since warned people when they'll say, "Oh, well, something terrible could happen, I'll just call 911. You can't always call 911. And at the time, I just remember looking at the phone and the numbers were swirling and I just knew hit something 11, but I really couldn't get it right. So I continued to be very broken. I think my brain broke that night, and I continued to be broken for several weeks until I got in with a good psychiatrist, a good doctor, and then had my friends all coming around me to help me so much. So I did recover, although you may all wonder. If you wonder, where does she get that weird sense of humor she has? Probably had a lot to do with it.
So it makes me think too about when somebody has a loved one that dies, and then people will say to them, "What, I'm here if you need me." And it's like, well, they can't think to know what they even need.
Right.
Like if you can't call 911,
No.
like having your thoughts together enough to say, "I need food," or "I need whatever," it's just not there. So usually when people think about someone who's suicidal, like your husband, you think of it as something, and I think the TV and movies certainly do this, where it's like this depressed person, they're depressed for a reason, they're depressed for a while, they've been that way for a while, and then they finally become fed up with it, and they take action. So talk to me a little bit about the types of suicide.
It's so interesting because there are so many different reasons and so many variables. But I did a deep dive as part of my healing after this. I really had to understand it. And so the thing that made this so unsettling to me is this was not a depressed man. He had never been a depressed man. He was an angry man. And he would have tantrums and fits when something didn't go his way or when he was opposed. And, he had never been someone that I thought would harm himself. And the backstory here with this, which the book goes into a bit later, was that I had told him that day that I was done and wanted a divorce. And I was very calm. He was very calm. I didn't get this rage reaction, which was what I expected. So I went off to work, saw clients, and came home that night after dark, and that's what I found. And there was a big poster on the front door, "I'm waiting for you." And so it had a very different feel to me than what I had been trained to look for with suicidal people, which is depression. So as I started studying suicide, I did connect with someone who was a researcher at Harvard. And what I learned at the time was that about 50% of people who commit suicide are very depressed. And that's the classic thing that we understand. And they're just trying to make the pain stop. They don't see a way out. Their brain is lying to them and telling them it's hopeless. And of course, those are the people we want to try to help and get into treatment. But there were other subsets of suicide. And of course, one is people who have chronic illness and they're just done. And that can be a very, something we can all understand, I think, when people are terminally ill and they want to go. So that's another significant type of suicide. Another type is when people are suffering from psychosis and they're having delusions and hallucinations. They don't know what's real. They think they're God. They try to fly out the window and they die. And psychosis is poorly understood. But that was significant. And then the final category, which is what the person said, this is what you're dealing with, is when there has been a domestic violence situation and you have a person who's rageful. And it's called revenge suicide. And this is what you'll often see when a woman is trying to leave a domestic violence situation. And we hear a lot about, well, he shot her and then shot himself, sometimes shot the kids. And people will say, but he was such a nice guy, we can't understand that. And so you're looking at a very different kind of personality with a very different kind of motivation. And that can be on a continuum. I talk about that in the book, where it can be where he tries to kill her and himself, killed the whole family. Some of you have stories about going through those kind of things. But the goal is revenge. And it's like, I am going to leave this burned onto your retinas because I know this will destroy you. And I think that was the goal here. And I remember after the cop was showing me this poster that had been on the front door. And I said, this is so weird. It was just surreal. And I said, this feels mean. And he looked at me and he said, this was mean. And so that's sort of the bigger story. But there's one quick thing I'll share. It's a little bit of a tangent. When I went on the KATV morning show on Friday, and we didn't go into much detail about the book other than it was about a revenge suicide and that there had been abuse in the marriage. And one of the staff members, one of the girls who worked in the back on the technology, I would say she was in her early 20s, she came up to me after and said, I need to talk to you about my relationship. And everything that you've been saying reminds me of the man I'm involved with. And she goes, I'm going to read your book, but I'd like to talk with you. So we talked about 10 minutes. And I gave her some of my little things that are my standard things that I say. So
I think that's what's so powerful about your book is as you read it, you're very aware of like how this can be really helpful to people who are stuck, people who don't recognize what's going on. You talk about in your book about class and poverty. You had a piece in there about childhood. Do you want to read that?
Yes, this is one of Mike's favorite stories. And so the whole book is not about death. I mean, there's quite a bit of death in it, but there's a lot of other things in it too. And I like to think some of them are moderately humorous. So another theme in the book is, why did I get married at 16? And I mean, I did a lot of weird stuff that's, that hopefully the book explains why I did it. Because the book is really the process of connecting the dots for me. And, poverty, we came from a poor family. And when nobody in your family has ever gone to college, you don't see options for yourself. And so getting married at 16 doesn't look like such a crazy thing to do. And so I do talk about a lot of the family history with the women in the family who made decisions to get married. My mother was 13. That wasn't really her decision, but a lot of these things happen. So this is a little bit about the sense I was different. but it's called A Cataclysmic Moment. W-A-R-S-H. It was the easiest word on the spelling test. I was hard-headed even in 3rd grade, and on that afternoon in September, I was incensed that my teacher was so wrong. Mrs. Craig had put a red check mark next to the word "warsh" on my spelling test. She'd made an error, and I knew better. I knew phonics, after all. When I think I'm right, which is most of the time, I'm known to take a stand and hold my ground. Since I'd started talking at 15 months old, Grandma had accused me of arguing for entertainment's sake, and on that one thing, Grandma was right. But I'd never agree with Grandma out loud. "If I said it was salt, you'd swear it was pepper," she'd say as I sat next to her on the plaid bench seat of her 1955 Plymouth. Grandma was only 4'11" and had to sit on a cushion to see over the steering wheel, which was so big it could have turned the Lusitania. I was already an expert at eye rolls and peevish facial expressions. My mother's pet name for me was Miss Smarty Mouth, and she didn't say it with affection. There was a lot to argue with Grandma about, like how she called lunch dinner and dinner supper, or how she thought the stories about baby aliens in the National Enquirer were true, how she called the fridge the icebox. Like my parents, Grandma hadn't gone to school past 8th grade, and even then it showed. "We are poor people, honey. We've always been poor," was her default explanation when I asked her to explain 1 or 1,000 things she said or did that made no sense. But on that day in 3rd grade, after the spelling quiz, I was righteous and confident and not going to settle for injustice. I should have gotten 100% on that quiz because I knew how to spell "warsh." I raised my hand and took a stand. "Excuse me," I told Mrs. Craig in front of the class. "I spelled that word right, but you marked it wrong." Mrs. Craig handled it well. She asked the other kids what they thought, and all those who spoke up argued against me. "It's W-A-S-H, said Shelley, my best friend, whose parents had gone to college and lived down the street. I thought Shelley pronounced some words funny, but I'd never said anything about it. Mrs. Craig suggested we get the dictionary to look it up for ourselves, which didn't rattle me. I was confident I would be vindicated. The cataclysmic moment came in less than 5 minutes when Shelley showed me the word on the page of the big classroom dictionary. W-A-S-H. It's pronounced wash, Shelley said. See, right here. I stared at the page and couldn't believe what I saw. My face grew hot and red. I was shaken to my core. Somebody in the back of the room laughed and said, "Look, she's turning red." Several others snickered. Something was terribly wrong, but I wasn't sure what it was. It was a feeling that would stick with me for decades, like a lingering, vague, unpleasant odor. I was different from other people, but couldn't quite understand why. Kids, even my friends, still giggled about my red hair and freckles. I stayed quiet in school and tried to blend into the background. I also made it a point to pay close attention to how my teachers and people on TV pronounced words, and over time began to affect a slightly proper British accent. I studied my spelling words with religious dedication and never got another word wrong on a spelling test.
I'm going to ask you a question just to drink some water.
Should I drink some water?
Yeah, drink some water if you feel like it, yeah.
Okay.
So you talk a lot, or through your book, there's a theme of class and poverty.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel like that shaped you?
I think it just shaped what I saw as possible. I really, really did not see college as possible. I mean, that was just not, nobody in my family had ever gone to college. My mother went through 8th grade, as did my father, and my mother got her GED in her 20s. And so that was always the backup plan that they told me, well, if you don't graduate high school, you can always get your GED. And so I was always thinking, I can get my GED if I need to. So I think it just really limited what I saw as choices. And then when I combine that with the religious craziness and a lot of the other stuff. It's really hard for people who meet me now to know what I was like as a kid. I don't know if I've just learned to fake it really well, probably a lot of that going on. But it was really, I think, college that changed my life when I eventually got there. And I got there after I had 3 kids as a teenager. So I did it in a very unconventional way. But it really, yeah, once I figured out I was not too stupid to go to college, it opened doors.
So class and poverty was a big theme. Another one was religion.
Yes.
And you and I have that in common, this like
Yes.
weird evangelical
Yes.
Christian crazy
Yes.
thing that we've trauma bonded around that.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
If that's a thing. So can you read a little bit about that aspect?
Yes. I have some very colorful characters that show up in the book. There were, quite frankly, a lot of mentally ill people in my family. And a couple of my aunts, actually 3 aunts, were very instrumental. I'm looking at Carrie because she loves the stories about the aunts. So I'm going to read a little bit about the aunts, not the whole chapter. But they had a big influence on my life. Annie and Jane, 1960s and 70s. Annie was my mother's older sister, and she read fortunes for a living. When I was 7, Grandpa fell over dead in the garden from a massive heart attack. After the funeral, Annie took over the spot in his old recliner and sat next with Grandma every day, watching divorce court, dragnet, and roller derby. Annie could divine meaning from regular old playing cards spread across a kitchen table to determine whether or not a husband was prone to infidelity. She read tea leaves to predict if a firstborn child would be a boy or a girl. Annie would advise you to improve your luck by putting a bay leaf in your pillowcase when you sleep, or attract a lover by drinking tea made from ginger. When a mourning dove cooed 3 times in a row, Annie would say it was sure somebody close to you would die. Annie saw patterns everywhere, and she knew how things were connected. She had short, curly, copper-colored hair and ever-present gold hoop earrings that she never took off. When I was growing up in the 60s and 70s, she wore bold floral patterned dresses she called shifts that hugged her ample curves and made me think of Hawaii. Her lipstick was always ravishing red. Annie drove a blue Mustang, which she wrecked and replaced at least twice during my elementary school years. She taught me to dance the hula barefoot on the grass in the backyard and convinced me there really was a man who lived in the moon with his wife. "I'm a counselor, honey. I've always had a gift," Annie explained when I asked her how she earned money. "See that actress on Days of Her Lives? I read cards for her and her friends in Hollywood. I have a whole list of clients I help. They've come back to me for years." Annie gave love life advice to soap opera stars from patterns she could discern in formations of cards she'd been trained to interpret by an old Roma man she'd met at the Eagles Lodge where she'd been cocktail waitressing. She made $20 in cash every time she gave a reading. Jane was my pious aunt, married to my father's hard-drinking brother. He had a reputation as a misanthropic alcoholic, but Jane was known as a woman of God. She was tall, blonde, rail-thin, and straight-backed with a small, tight smile that never revealed her teeth. Her lipstick was such a pale pink you could barely see it. She wore crisp white blouses that she pressed with her iron. Jane inspired my admiration. She drove a long beige station wagon with plenty of room for kids and groceries in the back. She never broke the speed limit. She was a stay-at-home mom who believed that the man was the head of the household and the breadwinner, and she took care of everything else. Jane's worldview came strictly from the Bible. I went to church with Jane and her girls on Sunday mornings and often to the youth group on Wednesday evenings. God and the rituals surrounding him were the center of the home, which naturally excluded my uncle since he was unsaved and therefore destined for hell. According to Jane, so were my parents and all the rest of our relatives. Even those who professed to be Christians, like my mother, weren't living a Christ-centered life, which meant they weren't legitimately saved. My mother wasn't a churchgoer and didn't try to lead others to the Lord, one of the most important signs of a real Christian. Either you were a real Christian and lived every moment as an ambassador for Christ, or you belonged to Satan. There were no gray areas when it came to heaven or hell. Most of our family members were going to hell. I prayed for them all at least 6 times a day, and I'd pray in the middle of the night when I woke up with bad dreams about Armageddon, the Antichrist, and the mark of the beast. Insomnia was always a problem. There was so much praying to do, and I was never sure I was getting it right. I put my whole heart into praying. I could feel my chest tighten as I lay in bed at night, trying to make sure God heard me. But the devil was everywhere. I could feel him in the dark, like a moth landing on my hair.
I relate so much to that because I was thinking about, in my book, I talk a lot about religion and how that, especially at that young age where you're so impressionable and you just want your life to make sense and you want the trauma that you're experiencing to make sense. And I remember being in middle school and going to church camp, like on the weekends. And there was a girl in my class, and she had said, we were talking about Christianity. She said, well, I'm not a Christian. And I remember getting really upset, like, oh my gosh, she's going to go to hell. And I really like her. Like, I don't want her to go to hell. So I need to do something about this. So I invited her to go with me to the church camp so that she could be saved. And it was very distressing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I started thinking about what other kids in my class who I like are not, that are going to go to hell. And so I really related to that. And then also you spoke in your book about witnessing.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's like a whole nother level, right? Where you've got to go out. And so that's kind of what I was doing, was witnessing, trying to recruit people, I suppose, is another way to say it. So can you talk a little bit about the witnessing that you did?
Yeah. I have a little section about witnessing. We jumped to age 14 here when I was a soldier for Christ. I was a soldier for Christ in a cataclysmic battle of good versus evil, but I had no idea what to do with life after high school. I was 14. Mom frequently reminded me that I'd be expected to move out at 18 and I'd better have a job to support myself. Your parents don't take care of you after you turn 18. You're on your own, she'd say, adding, I was put to work in the slaughterhouse when I was 11, so don't think you have it so bad. Nobody in my family had ever gone to college. Finishing high school was considered a monumental achievement. Mom explained that if I didn't graduate, I could always take my GED test like she had. The GED was respectable enough. Yet I'd never seen either of my parents crack open a book, despite their investment in a set of encyclopedias when I was in first grade. Those encyclopedias were the only books in the house besides my own, and I often read them for fun. My parents were proud of my reading habit, hoping I would do better in life than they had. But my free time was largely spent at church or witnessing, trying to lead others to the Lord. At youth group, we were taught to be missionaries in our own neighborhoods. There was no need to travel to foreign countries when we were surrounded by Satan's prisoners right at home. Everyone who didn't think like us. We bonded through fear. The devil was everywhere, even in our own families. Souls were ripe for harvesting in our homes and on our streets, and it was our job to bring them to God. On summer days when school was out, it was all about witnessing. Candy and Denise were my youth group friends from the Assembly of God. Together, we trekked down dirty sidewalks strewn with cigarette butts, going door to door in our neighborhood, ringed by tall, skinny palm trees. Squinting in the smog-tinged yellow light of the California sun, we rang doorbells, sharing the gospel with indifferent neighbors. We offered a small booklet outlining the 3 easy steps to salvation and the chance to pray with us right on the spot to be born again. Most neighbors were polite, but none accepted our offer. Unlike the formally dressed Mormons or Jehovah's Witnesses who work the same streets, we wore faded Levi's 501 jeans, ragged at the bottoms, over our flip-flops. I sported a long copper French braid cascading down my back and favored cozy bohemian-style blouses that paired well with my denim jeans and flip-flops. This was a significant departure from my peers, who might have been expected to sell Girl Scout cookies or magazine subscriptions. I was saving souls and thwarting the devil. How cool was that?
So let's move forward a little bit to you got through your childhood and you became a therapist. And you're married to this guy, you're helping women who are in abusive situations. And so what struck me is there was this dissonance between you're helping people in very similar situations that you were in, but you couldn't recognize this in yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So talk a little bit about that.
Whew, it's a big subject. Therapists that have blind spots. I did really good work when I was a young therapist. One of my first jobs was in a women's shelter domestic violence program. And I really connected with the women. And they were also usually from low income backgrounds, people who didn't have a lot of resources. So we made really quick bonds and quick connections. But I was living with a man with a rage problem. And I was rationalizing that he had a tough childhood and he must have been bipolar or he must have ADHD. And I kept trying to come up with a therapy fix for it. And so he liked going to therapy. He had a degree in psychology. And at this point, I was no longer religious. I had flushed that. And so my new religion, I talk a lot in the book about my new religion being psychology. And I embraced that with this fervor and this faith. And I really thought I could straighten him up and fix him and help him get a job and all these things that he struggled with. But the rage problems never abated, despite how much therapy he went to. It never made a difference. And so I saw myself as I didn't get punched. I didn't get my face cut up with bottles the way women that I was working with did. So I thought, well, I've got this challenging situation, but I'm really strong and I'm really smart now. And I know all this psychology and it's going to get fixed someday. So I think the term is future faking ourselves. In truth, I was very enmeshed with him. He knew how to appeal to my need for nurturance and attention. He was so good at, what would we say? If he saw me drifting away or being upset with him, he would love bomb and tell me these wonderful things. And I was so starved for attention, I just soaked it up. And I had never felt loved like that before. So it was a very pathological bond. But as I say, we can have very tight pathological bonds with people who are not good for us. And we call it love. In truth, it's a trauma bond. So I was with him for 17 years. And I would say over time, my awareness that, okay, we're dealing with personality disorder here. We're dealing with character problems. I became increasingly aware of that. And that's, I think, a lot of what the book goes through is my opening my eyes and becoming more aware that I was living with abuse. And even though he didn't punch me, he would do things like throw me around and shove me around and hold me down and sometimes put his hands around my neck and scream in my face and all these things that were abuse. But it was more my own neediness, I think, and my lack of clarity and my future faking that this is all going to get better someday. And I think a lot of therapists fed into that because we went to a lot of couples counseling. And there's always somebody's got their modality or their methodology that's going to fix every marriage, which I don't believe, and I think that's absolute nonsense. But there's a lot of bad work that gets done, unfortunately, particularly as under the guise of couples counseling. Not that sometimes it doesn't do some good, but I think sometimes it does harm. And it never made a difference with his character flaws. And so that's another thing that as the book goes on, I become increasingly aware of that. And I try to explain how the light bulbs came on for me over time. And then, of course, that ended with me making the final decision that I don't want to do this anymore. And then that's how he ended it. So
I think, again, with TV and movies, there's this romanticizing that happens in how we picture therapists. And like my big influence was probably Bob Newhart, right? And it was funny, and oh, I just love that show. I don't think I understood half of it at the time, but so I was interested in this, talking about the topic of therapists seem like they're safe because they know all the tools. And I asked, last week I asked ChatGPT to describe a therapist's office.
Oh, that's funny.
And it was really interesting. So here's what it said. It said, you walk into an office, there's a faint lavender scent in the air, a strategically placed box of tissues already halfway used, and a well-worn couch that practically whispers, "Tell me about your mother." There's a Zen fountain trickling in the corner for ambiance, because apparently emotional breakthroughs require running water. A bookshelf boasts every self-help book ever written, from Getting Unstuck to Why Am I Like This? And of course, the therapist herself has a calm voice, a knowing smile, and a plant she's definitely keeping alive better than you're keeping your own life together. So you fix people, or that's the
myth.
That's
That's
the myth.
That's
is
what
that you're
think.
going to fix people, but it's not always easy for you. And you had a part in the book that was, you had a really not great experience as a therapist, and it struck me as like, how did you keep doing this? So you don't have to read from it, but can you tell the story of the
phone call?
Of the phone call, or if you want to.
It might be easier to read it. It's short.
Okay. And then after that, what do you think? We'll open up for Q&A?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll leave them on this really depressing note.
Yeah.
Will you leave us like that in the book?
Well, when I worked at County Mental Health, which I had to do after Robert's death, because I didn't have health insurance and I couldn't get it in private practice. So community mental health just about killed me. And I could write a book just on the horror stories of things that happened in community mental health. But this was a true story, and so this is basically a transcript of a phone call. How may I help you? Phone call to my office in 2013. Hello, this is County Mental Health Crisis Line. I'm Shavaun Scott. How may I help you? Yeah, I have a question about medication. How many Ambien does it take to kill you? Whoa, it sounds like you're struggling. Let's talk about this. What's your name? I'm not telling you that. And I know you don't have caller ID on those county phones. I'm calling so you can listen to me die. Is anyone with you now? Where are you? Oh, I'm home, alone. And I'm taking 2 bottles of Ambien while I drink this bottle of wine. Here, you can hear me swallow some more. Hey, I can't pretend to know what you're experiencing or all you've been through, but I'm glad you called for help. I'm sure it's hard to feel hopeful right now, maybe impossible, but I'd like to hold hope for you. I've felt hopeless many times in my life, but things have improved over time. I may be wrong, but I hope things can improve for you. Nope, I don't believe that. You people have never helped me before, so fuck you all. I'm mad at the world. Here, I'm swallowing some more. That makes 60 pills. It shouldn't be long now. How do you like this conversation? Hey, I'd love to sit down and have coffee with you and talk face to face. I want to hear more and get to know you. I can come wherever you are. You could tell me how the system has let you down and how we can improve. You sound very depressed. I know the system is flawed and I want us to do better. Oh, sure, like you care. The doctor took away my Xanax for no good reason. You'd bring the cops and have me locked up. What would you have me do? Write in a journal? Go to a support group? I've done all that. You're only there to collect a paycheck. Fuck you all. I've been fucked over by everyone in my life. Fuck you all. I'm done. Hey, I'm looking out a window right now and I can see the sky. Can you see the sky where you are? It's so beautiful today. Is there a way you can get outside? Do you have a neighbor you can talk to? I'm lying on the bathroom floor, getting sleepy. Fuck you, bitch. Look, it's not too late. I don't want to hang up, but it's not too late for you to call 911. They could get there in time. You don't have to go today. There's always another day if you're sure you need to leave like this. Hello? Hello? I'm listening. Can you hear me? I'm right here. I'm looking out the window and holding hope for you. I can see the sky. It's beautiful. The trees are tall and green. I picture you standing tall like a redwood rooted in the ground, reaching up to the sky toward the sun. I'm still here. I'm listening. Keep breathing. Can you hear me? Hello? I'm still here. Hello? I'm listening. So that's the one when we did the Audible book. I had to do a bunch of takes on that because I cry. That's such a vivid memory.
So powerful.
Yeah.
How long did it take you to sort of recover from that?
I don't think I'm recovered from that.
Yeah.
I think I knew there were just some real violent, scary things that happened in that clinic, and we were underfunded and understaffed, and the staff cared so much and tried so hard, and people came in that were so dangerous, and there were just so many bad things. I was terrified to go to work in the morning. And so then I fortunately got a brain tumor and had an excuse to quit. But really, I was grateful for the brain tumor. It's like, I'm out of here now. So.
All right, so we are dark. That doesn't mean everyone loves this.
I know, we laugh.
So we're gonna go to Q&A, but before we do that, many of you know Shavaun, and many of you know that she's incredible on Facebook and has these incredible memes, and some are really poignant, some are like the perfect timing for you in your life, some are funny. And so if you don't follow her, I highly encourage you to follow her on Facebook. You post once at least a day,
20 times a day.
A lot of times a day, yeah.
Hourly.
Yeah, that's true. So one of her incredible memes was that I was looking up today, said, just thought I'd let you know that you crossed my mind today. I was chasing you with a chainsaw. I liked that one. And then the other one was, can I count my traumatized inner child as a dependent on my taxes? So I love that you can hold both. You can be incredibly funny and incredibly dark and real. And I think we need people like you.
I hope I give people permission to embrace that side. Yeah.
So let's I'd love to open it up for Q&A. We have about 10 minutes. So what questions do you have for Shavaun? We didn't really talk about the craft of her writing this. It was more focused on the actual book, but yeah.
I very much identified with your religious story and with Heidi's religious story. For those of us who experienced that and have sort of intellectually come to a different position, do you feel that you're emotionally free of that early indoctrination?
Yeah, it's a mixed thing, isn't it? It's so hard, and I think we progress over time. I definitely flushed it in my 20s because I saw none of it worked. You know, everybody you prayed for died, and I mean, it just didn't work. So I flushed that, but it was still hard for me to talk about it, and so I just basically never talked about it. And in the last 10 years, certainly with the rise of the religious right and all the things happening politically, I've gotten a lot more comfortable talking about it. But there's still this little part of me in my head, like I said to Mike today, oh, it's raining, we're having a big storm, God's mad at me. That's sort of like that inner child stuff is so ingrained that I will immediately go to, it's a punitive God if there's something, and I know better, so cognitively I don't buy that at all. But yeah, I think once you're wired that way really early in life, it's pretty hard to get over it. And I'll always probably be a person, not nearly as bad as I used to because I've had so much therapy, but prone to guilt, prone to shame. And I have to work really hard at not letting myself go there. I think some of my work with therapy and wanting to save all the battered women in the world and everything else, that was my own version of proselytizing, and I'm still a proselytizer, it's just for different things now.
Yeah.
I'm going to pray for you.
Okay.
No, you're not. Another question. Yeah.
You talked about when you were with your friends afterwards and they were caring for you, and then you said that you found a very good therapist. How did your past as being a therapist, did that help or hinder you when you were going through therapy after that to recover from that?
I think it helped because the jargon, like they could talk about what was happening with my brain, and at one point with the grief, when I first found my friend found a really good psychiatrist for me, and he said, "You have delusional grief. Do you understand what I'm saying?" I understood, because I knew what a delusion was. And so when he was explaining, this is what your brain is doing to you, and this is why we've got to get you on a medication that will help you sleep, because you've got to have sleep to recover. It's like, okay, that it made it easier in that way. It all lined up for me. And I knew when the first therapist I saw, it was like literally the day after it happened, I went to a hospice and they had an emergency person, and she was an intern, and she did not know she didn't have a clue what to do. And I could tell she was freaked out by my story. And so I knew I had enough to know this person doesn't know how to handle me. And so I think my own expertise, it gave me a little bit of an edge with knowing when I found a good person, it's like, okay, this guy knows, and he nailed it and really did me a lot of good.
Yeah.
How long did it take you to write the book physically as compared to when you started first thinking about, I need to get rid of some of this stuff?
Yeah, when I moved to Portland in 2017, I wanted to make friends, and I started going to writing groups, and I just kind of stumbled into writing groups. It wasn't ever like I set out, oh, I'm going to study memoir now. It was like I just fell into them. And all you people here, you're all part of my community now, because that's how I met you all. So as I say, my chosen family. But and so I wrote over 8 years. I mean, I have a stack of writing in this big binder, and I didn't think it was going to be a book. And I just was writing because I enjoyed it, and my friends all write now. And then a guy wrote on Facebook, and Kurt Lovelace, who's a publisher, and he said, because I like your funny memes and you make me laugh all the time and you have a weird sense of humor, have you thought about writing a memoir? And I'm like, you want me to write a memoir? And he's like, I'd love to publish a memoir. And I'm like, well, I can do that. So it just took, I'd say I spent about 3 months going through my stories and just picking out and trying to go, okay, what would make a narrative here? And it came to me really easily. And so I just threw that together and let like half a dozen of my good friends read it and give me feedback, and they did. And so I have to say, I didn't get an agent. I didn't get a big 5 publishing company, but it was really easy. And I mean, once I had it all written, it was an easy thing to put the book together. So, and then I expected everybody would hate it and go, what's this little dark pamphlet this woman wrote? And it's all weird, and but I'm really heartened by the Goodreads reviews and the things people are saying about it. And as I say, if even 1 or 2 people, if it helps them in some way, I feel good about that.
So we have time for a couple more. Yeah.
I too had a beginning where I didn't think I had many options, and I wasn't sure I was smart enough to do things, and I changed.
Mm-hmm. You and I have a lot in common.
Yes, we do. What do you think, I'm sure it wasn't just one thing, that brought you from the place of seeing few options to, in an environment and a world and a family where people didn't go to college, to think, I'm going to go to college. Just what led you to have confidence in and believe in
There
yourself?
were a few older women I met that I think were role models for me. And one particular was my therapist. I started therapy in my early 20s for depression. And I talk about her in the book. Her name's Rosalind. And she told me, you can do anything you want. And you have choices. And she started listing off all the things I had choices about. And getting an education was one choice. And as I say, the word choice was the scariest word anybody had ever said to me, because now all of a sudden I'm responsible for my life. I don't have to sit here passive and say, well, God is controlling everything and I have no control. So I started having this sense of agency that developed. And then once I took my first community college class, which I think was a bonehead English, just go in and see what it was like. And then I started taking psychology classes. But in that first class, I thought, these people aren't that smart. Because I always thought people who went to college were up here and I was down here. And I thought, I fit in just fine. I can do all this. And so once I started with psychology classes, I was in love with the process, because that's what was giving me a map of the world and how to understand things and understand my family. So then I was sold, and then I wanted to be a therapist. So
one last question.
Well, I can read my little poem. Mike fell in love with this poem, and he said when he heard it on the Audible book, he kept thinking that someone else wrote it. He didn't know who wrote it. I said, it's mine. Okay. Fine transparent vapors. What peculiar work this is. Professional listening. Traveling roads where no one wants to go. Surgically dancing with tendrils of pain. Wounded healers ourselves, we bear witness. Is it hubris to think we make a difference, assuming that caring and attunement will help? We show up, sensing contours, giving our best, finding unexpected grace and small victories in pale, stained radiance. My story changes you. Your story changes me. Mysteries unlocked and histories rewritten. Minds expand into a greater space. We dance. Perhaps listening is another form of prayer. Perhaps it's the bond that becomes something sacred. Stories connect hearts and then rise in the air like fine, transparent vapors.
All right. Thank you. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you, guys.
And Mode, if you want to.
This has been so nice.
All for coming. This was wonderful. Congratulations to you, Shavaun.
Thank you, thank you.
Books are for sale at the counter. Come on down, grab a cupcake, and we'll be open till 9. Hang out. Carrie Stanley, are you here?
Right here.
Pass this back.
And if you've already bought Shavaun's book, feel free to buy another book. It's important that we support Annie Blooms. And
Dumb Girl by
Oh.
Heidi Yewman is available for pre-order if you would like to go ahead and put that in.
And she is not a dumb girl. I will tell you that.
Yeah, come see me if you would like to put in a pre-order. Or Mal or
Heidi is a go-getter. She is brilliant, a wonderful person, and her book is great. I had the privilege of reading an early copy, but it is, and there's a reason it's called Dumb Girl, but it's not because she's dumb.
thank you. So yeah, if you want Shavaun to sign your book, we can sort of form a kind of line here, and if that's something that you'd like to do. But thank you all for coming.
Yeah, you
It's
guys
so nice to see
really
your support.
touches my heart. Totally touches my heart. And I love you all, honestly. Everybody's familiar, and I just love everybody here. Thank you.
And here's what I'm thinking